Hello, fabulous listeners. Thanks for tuning in to Old Bodies Outside. This is your host, Dr. Brian Peterson. This episode's guest is Dr. Rob Bell, who is a mental toughness coach. He has a PhD in sports psychology from the University of Tennessee and has completed a variety of endurance races such as Ironmans and ultramarathons. Furthermore, he has written 8 books about mental toughness. On May 5th, he released his most recent book titled, I Can't Wait to Be Patient. You can find more information about Dr. Bell at www.drrobbell.com. I invited Dr. Bell on the Old Bodies Outside because I'm fascinated about mental toughness and how it applies to daily life. Dr. Bell, it's an honor to have you on Old Bodies Outside.
Thanks for having me, Doc. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, where are you connecting in from?
Indianapolis, man. We've been here since 2008, and my kids are now native Hoosiers, and this is home, man. We love this state.
All right. How old are your kids?
My daughter's 14, and my son is 12, man. Yeah, the
Okay,
days are long,
we're
but
kind
the
of
years
right.
are fast.
Yeah. And there's probably a lot of spontaneity with juggling kids around and moving them around. I have an 11 and a 12-year-old.
Yeah, we're
Today
in the
my
same
wife
boat,
is.
man.
Yeah, that's right. My wife is probably taking off any minute right now to take my son over to some football conditioning for the day, and then he'll be coming back home later. So he's got a good day ahead of him. Okay, well, to get the conversation started, I wanted to actually ask you about the movie Air. And we were talking earlier, it sounds like you're familiar with that movie. And so during that movie, there's a very emotional part in which Sonny Vaccaro, who's played by Matt Damon, is delivering this speech to Michael Jordan. He's not met Michael Jordan yet, he's only met his mother. But he gives this speech that's almost like talking about, hey, you're going to be this awesome athlete, you're going to be built up, but there's going to be times where you're going to drop down the other side of the mountain, and how you react to that is that's what's going to solidify your legacy. I want to know what you thought about that speech when you heard it.
Yeah, man. I mean, watching the movie, I thought it was just so excellently done. I mean, the stars in there were perfect. I thought Ben Affleck's character was fantastic. I mean, playing Phil Knight, it was just, his eccentricities were just fantastic. And, living through watching Michael Jordan play, so everyone that watched Michael Jordan play still today would say, well, Michael Jordan was still the best. You know what I mean? And that's the part that it's a little difficult when you don't get to see somebody play. Like I never saw Oscar Robertson play, so I don't know how good he was. You're always relying on what other people say. And then so that whole nostalgia part of that movie. And then when it comes to that talk, it's like, absolutely. I mean, I resonated with it because like all of us have like these mountaintop moments. We're climbing the mountain. We reach that mountaintop moment, that moment of success. And then the issue always becomes like, we can't live on top of that mountain. At some point we have to come back down. And the way that I've always seen it, especially with those, the media will create and tear down whoever that they want to. And that's the power of the media, the power of the sports media. And yeah, that speech that he gave, very motivating. I thought it was one of the best ones. It was obviously the best part of the movie, and it just reminds us though that everything is temporary, and it is going to be how we respond and not react to the situations and difficulties and the great parts that happen in life as well. I mean, that's the part that we kind of forget. We're always talking about overcoming the challenges. And that part is absolutely true, but we got to overcome the mountaintop moments, because we have to come back down the mountain. And if you look, I mean, with Everest, most deaths happen on Everest on the way back down the mountain, not on the way up. And that's because what happens after we have success, that even becomes a bigger challenge than always just striving and trying to climb that mountain. It's how we deal, handle, and cope with the success part.
Yeah, I feel like maybe some complacency might enter as part of that success, possibly. Maybe when you're climbing back down Everest, you're like, hey, like I've got to the peak, like I'm just on a high right now because of my my achievement. And then maybe you you're not focusing so much on the little steps on the way down and you make an error or something.
That's exactly what happens, man. Yeah. And same thing like with life, right? Like we reached it, man. I got it. We made it. But we don't live there, you know. Brett Favre was a perfect example when he won the Super Bowl. I mean, he was holding up Super Bowl trophy, and if you really pay attention, multiple people that have won, major championships and Super Bowls say the same thing. But he said, "Is that it?" And I was like, what do you mean, is that it? Like, what else could there be for a football player? Winning the Super Bowl should be it. Well, the thing was, is he didn't want it to end. And he knew at that moment, even though it was better winning than it was losing, he didn't want it to end. And at that point, then it was over. And so it really, that just, look, it always going to get back to the process that we're going through, the journey that we're climbing, and then how well we're enjoying that rather than just the mountaintop moment, because that will pass and we have to come back down the mountain.
Yeah, that mountaintop success is temporary. And I like that you brought up that um, focusing on the process and getting back to that. And I think that's something that's really fun as a person, as an athlete, no matter what you're doing, is, focusing on yourself. How can I get better at being, putting on a presentation for work, or how I interact as a husband, or how I interact as a dad, or how I interact with students. I think that, that process and having that level of personal humility and reflection probably goes a long ways.
Yeah. It's, you know what, one of the parts about life, and you being a runner, I mean, you kind of get this as well, man. It's like, you train to do the best you can, like in that race. But when you look back, it can't just all be for that race. The reason why is because what are the small things that we're learning, like about ourselves throughout that process as well? And I'm not saying like you have to have both, right? You have to have that goal that you're going for, but then it's always getting back to, all right, man, well, how am I recovering? How's the discipline in terms of waking up? How focused am I during those workouts? What am I learning about myself? Am I giving myself that out that I don't need to really push it here? Like all those lessons that kind of come in, that is what transfers into all parts of our life. It all can't just be for that race and that moment of hitting the goal, even though it's wonderful. It has to be, and it always gets back to, what am I learning about myself in these situations? And sometimes, I mean, I say, especially in those ultra marathons, like you meet yourself, you meet your true self. There's not going to be much, uh, pump up music that's going to be helping you when, you're 60 miles into a 100-mile race and just really sucking. You meet yourself, and you don't always like who you meet. That's the problem. But it's like, okay, well, after those experiences, what did I learn about myself and my situation that's going to help me? What are the gaps that I need to look at in my own life that are really going to help me improve and get better?
Yeah, that's wonderful advice, and I can definitely relate to that ultra marathon aspect. I think during ultra marathon, sometimes you even go through kind of multiple deaths where you're hitting lows, you're hitting extreme lows multiple times, and something that I personally think is really important is during those times, my motivation might waver. It might change, but I have to tell myself, stay disciplined. Like, yes, you're in a low spot. That's okay. You're right where you're supposed to be. You're working hard out there. But stay disciplined, stay on top of your water, stay on top of your calories, stay on top of your salt. Let's just get to the next aid station. Like we don't need to focus on the destination right now. And that's something that carries over to my life really nicely. For example, getting a PhD, it's an ultra marathon, and there's those lessons that transfer over, just as you mentioned.
Yeah, yeah, indeed, man.
Okay, so I wanted to hear from you. I have an idea about what mental toughness is, but honestly, I haven't studied it nearly in depth the way that you have. I mean, this is your thing. You know mental toughness. And so what is meant by mental toughness?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think it's like, I mean, if you just Google it, I mean, in like definition, you'll come across 20 different definitions. Then they all sound great, you know what I mean? But too often, it's just they kind of want you to look over here a little bit in terms of confidence, commitment. Hey, the 4 C's of mental toughness, and it's like we just got off track in terms of mental toughness. I'm a simple is powerful kind of guy, right? So I'm always getting back to Jim Blair, 1986. His definition of mental toughness is how we, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase, right? But how we deal, handle, and cope with adversity in life. And that's all it is. It's how we deal with the setbacks and the struggle in life. That's all mental toughness is, man. And I'm a cash and carry kind of guy, man. It's just like, let's just keep this simple. You don't need to muddy the waters in terms of your own definitions, but that's it, man. How do you deal with adversity? Simple. Not easy, but it's
Yeah,
simple. And then there's a lot of factors, and I can always go into it. And there's a lot of factors that go into, mental toughness and what it is and what it isn't and all that. But, I'm happy to elaborate, man. You just lead the way.
well, I was thinking about that, that dealing with adversity aspect. And as you were explaining that, I was thinking about the different scales of adversity. So there might be, um, let's say, I think adversity is kind of on a continuum where, there might be some really traumatic things that happen in life. Say a parent dies, versus there might be something where I'm wearing sandals for the day and I stub my toe and happen to fall on the sidewalk in front of everyone and embarrass myself. And so there's a lot of different contexts to adversity. And so, how can people be kind of prepared for these pieces of adversity, even if they haven't faced it before?
Yeah. Well, I think in life, and that's the beauty of sport in general, is we get the test first and then we get the lesson afterwards. It's not too often in school. It's not like school at all, right? We don't show up and now we're taking the final exam the first day and then I'm going to teach you everything you need to know. It doesn't happen that way. We get the test first and then we get the lesson afterwards. So the power in it is really, how do we debrief? How am I able to look at that? How was I able to handle that situation better? And what that requires then, is a lot of coaching ourselves up, allowing others to coach us up. I hate messing up. I hate making mistakes, especially, when my kids are going to point that out to me, right? Like, you were kind of rushed in that situation. And, and that's just their polite way of saying, you got angry there. So we get the test first, then we get the lesson afterwards. So a lot of times, man, it's just being able to look back and reflect. How could I have done that better? What was that trigger in that situation? Why did I get off my mental game? And yeah, man, adversity, like, I mean, it could be as simple, and a lot of times it is, it's as simple as getting stuck in traffic or the technology not working. Like, a lot of times it's not always, and Muhammad Ali said this, and I really agree with it a lot. He said, it's not the mountain that wears you down, it's the pebble in your shoe. I couldn't agree more, man. It's like, look, deaths are going to happen in life, and the big stuff, like, we inherently just know, okay, I mean, this is a really tough situation that we're going to be going through. I need people in my life here that can help kind of direct me. What we don't reach out to is, you know what, for some reason, I can't ever connect on the internet when I need to, you know what I mean? Or this website just doesn't load fast enough, or when am I going to get that call back from that person? And then, or we got this project that's just not done. Now, those are the little stressors in life. Those are the pebbles in your shoe. And those often, man, that's what, like, they kind of build upon themselves. So it's like, man, getting really good at mastering the simple things in life. Then we get better at mastering, I think, the big things.
Yeah, and I was thinking back as you're talking about the pebble in the shoe, and handling that and its compounding effect, as you mentioned. That was something that, as I transitioned out of adolescence into young adulthood, and then furthermore into midlife, something that I think I wasn't prepared for as I hit midlife. It was something that really crept up a lot in midlife, was the compounding effect of the pebble in the shoe. And I think because in midlife there's just a lot going on. Like, you got kids that are just, they're testing everything out, they're having a ton of fun. As a parent, want to make sure that they're able to have those experiences, seek those opportunities. I'm also juggling a full-time career, having fun with the podcast, and so there's all kinds of pebbles in the shoe. And I think you're absolutely right. Learning how to manage that level of adversity, and the compounding effect, is something that's really, really important.
And that's where we always, at least now, I mean, I'm always getting back to the power of time. And are we approaching our issues and adversity through the power of time first and initially? Because often I mean, it's our most precious resource. It's what we all have, but it's what we use the worst. And there are things that are so important in our lives, but too often we succumb to that which is urgent. Might be sort of important, but it's not really that important, but it's urgent. Now that's going to trump what's important. And now that's where the stressors and being overwhelmed and rushed really happen.
Yeah. So what you're saying is with time, if something urgently comes up, it might almost have a zap to your system or like, hey, I gotta tend to that. But now it's actually kind of wasting some time that's actually more could be more beneficial over here.
Right. It's not only wasting time, it's wasting mental energy. Um, but yeah, and I succumb to it as well, man, because when something becomes urgent, it's like, wait, I need to deal with it. I need to handle that right now. Um, and urgency trumps the important all the time. Well, depending on where we are in our life, if we get hit with these code reds and code blues throughout the entire day, then not only do we get mentally drained and overwhelmed, but we don't ever really get to focus on that which is important. And then that becomes really the big detriment, I think, in our lives, is we have to be doing and focusing on that which is truly important. And when we boil it down, there are just a few things that are really, really important in life, ultimately. And now there's a lot of moving parts that come to it. Absolutely, man. But when that's getting back to, are we delegating? Are we scheduling? Are we planning? Do we have that downtime? Do we have that recovery piece that's planned for ourselves? I don't think like we overtrain in life. Like I don't think that there's too much stress. I really don't. Now, if you ask me when I'm stressed, I'd say, well, yeah, absolutely. Things are overwhelmed. There's too much going on. No, what I think though is that we under recover. I think we didn't prepare for it well enough. I don't think that we're carrying over last week or yesterday into today. And, there's just not a lot of white space in there for us to, de-stress and go from one issue to another. And that's how I see it, man. It could be wrong, but I think when it comes to patience, it's recovery of the mind. And that's how important that becomes, man, is are we allowing our mind to recover and to catch up, or are we just focused on that which is urgent every single day?
And I think with finding that time for our mind to recover, I'm in complete agreement with you. I think it's really important, and I felt like you kind of alluded to the fact that we need help sometimes. Like and delegating and asking for help and saying, hey, I need help with this task. And it might be a simple task. It could be something that might take an hour, but sometimes we just need help. We need other people, no matter what the
Mm-hmm.
task is.
Yeah, no question, man. What I see, Doc, is too often though we just wait until we are overwhelmed, stressed, and anxious in order to start asking for help. You got to create that
Uh,
environment that you want before the adversity is going to hit, before those really stressful moments. So you can already then lean on other people that are going to be close to you to help you through these situations.
Yeah, and I think getting ahead of it like that also helps people kind of just be prepared. They're not, getting hit in this frantic moment that I'm having, and then I feel like they'll be more likely to help me then.
Yeah, no question, man.
Okay, so we've been kind of talking a little bit about the process versus focusing on the destination, and we've talked a little bit about some mental toolboxes with helping people out, how we look at time. Are we looking at it just like doing the urgent things? Are there any other toolboxes that you recommend to people for kind of sticking within that process of life versus focusing on the destination or the outcome or the success?
Yeah, it's I mean, I'm going to get back to time because I think it's our most precious resource, and that's how I look at everything now. As the process piece of knowing. I mean, let's just say that this too shall pass. Okay, we have to know that this too shall pass. That everything that we're going through is temporary, good and bad. And the reason why we know that to be a fact, it is simply because, and not some rah rah saying, not some motivational speak, but the fact of that the good times can't last. That alone is proof that the bad times can't last either. So we say, boy, I can't wait for that birthday party. Can't wait for that vacation. We never say, boy, I can't wait to like really be struggling in life. Like we don't say that. Well, then what we're doing is now we're trying to dictate the power of time. Now we're trying to say, and wait, this is really important, but I don't want the bad times. Look, pain and pleasure are absolutely a package deal. Like you do not get to the level that you want to get to without having go through the pain and pleasure part. But the proof that the bad times can't last is just getting through the good times can't last. The good times cannot last, and that alone is proof that the bad times can't last. And I just think let's just take an approach here with our mental game of focusing on the process, knowing that this too shall pass, whatever we're going through, good and bad. Well, now we're just taking a more objective viewpoint to whatever the stressors are going to be in life. And all we got to do then is really just getting back to, and you alluded to it earlier, right? Just make it to the aid station, man. Just make it to, the end of the street. And that's the part where it's left foot, right foot. And if we just keep moving, we're going to get there. That's ultimately the essence of that process. Now, the beauty about it is the better that we get on just focusing on the process, we get a gift in that. And the gift that we get in that is our second wind. The second wind, and just to use marathon example, just because mile 16 is awful does not mean that mile 21 is going to be awful as well. And the reason why is because, we regroup, right? You find a rhythm. You get that, whatever it is, man, you get some calories in you, something like that. But too often when I say mile 16 is bad, that means the rest is going to be bad as well. And like I just said, this too shall pass. Just focus on that, man. I think that is what grounds us and gets us into that process.
And by you just saying that, I actually was feeling like calmer and calmer because the way that you said, objectively looking at it, this too shall pass, bad times too shall pass. And it's like, okay, like we got this, like that's achievable suddenly. And before it, it feels like, oh my gosh, like where do I even start with this? Now it feels like, hey, yeah, this is achievable. This will pass.
Yeah. And I mean, we know, if we just look at time as supply and demand, like when we're young, like we have unlimited supply of time, very little demand. Now the demands increase. Absolutely. I think the demands now for people that are younger were a whole lot more than when I was younger. There's a lot more going on, but only as we get older do we realize, okay, well now time is limited. And now what happens with supply and demand when supply goes down, right? Well, it becomes more precious, becomes more valuable. And that's why we appreciate time, because we have the perspective of getting older and realizing, look how fast that things go. Back to the time example, man. And I do
I
these
wanted to
too,
touch on.
Doc. Like I coach and I love getting on a podcast because I have to remind myself of these, right? I can't coach myself. And only when I'm speaking out loud, only when I'm speaking truth into it, do I realize, like, yeah, Rob, absolutely, man. You were stressed out because you were just focused on what was urgent, not what was really important.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important to be able to kind of hear ourselves, hear what we're doing, to be able to, like you said, reflect and evaluate. So, for example, I go to science conferences and I will give an oral presentation. It's like 20 or 30 minutes. I will record myself in advance giving it to see how I'm doing. Like, how do I come off? And then that way I can, evaluate like, hey, like I went through that explanation super fast, or I missed a critical point. I need to remember to do that when I'm actually giving the presentation.
Film study, man.
Yeah, that's right. I know.
Yeah.
Film study on my own presentations. That's right.
Yep.
It goes a long way. I also wanted to touch on something that you said earlier too, and that is, I get in a habit of I'll be talking to my wife, and it'll be say the middle of the spring semester, say April or so. So spring break has already gone by, and now we got the rest of the semester it's got to go through. And I'll be like, babe, I'm just can't wait to go to the mountains this summer and go hiking with you and go camping. And I was getting into a sequence of saying this a lot. My wife eventually said, Brian, are you even like present right now? Like you're just looking to the future, looking to do this. you're not using your time right now. You're just looking to the future, and it snapped me out of it immediately. And that was another kind of great example of it's really hard to coach yourself too. And she just hit it for me, and I was like, oh my gosh, you're right.
It, and it's a balance, right? Um, it's never just one thing. I mean, there's a lot of gray that comes into life, and looking at the future gives us hope. You have to have hope. Hope is powerful. But ultimately, then it's just getting back to, okay, well, what are the things that I'm doing today? And what's the gratitude perspective I have in this moment that becomes powerful as well? I agree. Nothing is more important than this day. So it's about preparing for the future, but being able to live in the present.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up some gratitude. I think that that's something that is can really help fuel performance in sports too. Is having gratitude towards what did I personally accomplish today? And it may not even be physical; it might be a mental lesson. But being able to see that and to see how maybe I've gotten a little bit better than yesterday, and then a little bit better the next day, and a little bit better, and having some gratitude and seeing that I've done that, but also approaching it with some humility.
Yeah, man. I mean, let's get back to time, for instance, right? When we look back on, and somebody just told me this the other day, one of my coaches told me this. It was like, my kids are 14 and 12. Yesterday they were 4 and 2. The days are long, but the years are fast, man. And the clock grows legs when you have kids. If we, and I'm just so, my gratitude and perspective is rooted in, man, I just want to appreciate every moment that I have, because now what I see is not even 4 years, right? I see you got 3 more summers. Now that I see, okay, man, you got 3 spring breaks, and again, right, it's focused on that, but it's like, okay, man, well, let's make sure that every night this week that we're all spending time together, like doing this, whether it's going to be dinner or something like that, that we're all connected, because boy, those are just the precious times, man. And if we miss them, we never get those back. And that's where I just look at the power of time again, and being able to be rooted that moment and focused on, hey, what is really, really important.
Yeah, yeah. So the power of time has hit my family this week in a little bit of a different way, but it's exactly what you're saying. And so on Sunday, my kids go off to wilderness camp in northern Minnesota for a month.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly this week, we're all hanging out, we're playing cards together after dinner. People aren't going off onto their devices, and we suddenly are appreciating our time more because we're not going to be spending the next month together. And it's like, okay, like that's fantastic that we're doing that because y'all are taking off to your camp. But when you get back, we need to continue doing that and appreciate our time together and use it wisely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the same thing when we're, I mean, and that's a vacation, but it's like when we're all getting ready to get on vacation, do you know how productive we are? Right? I mean, to get everything done. So there's a sense of urgency towards that. And I think so here's the balance, right? Like, you have to approach spending time with the family, playing cards, with a sense of urgency. I'm not saying you play cards with a sense of urgency, but what am I doing? I'm planning on that. So I'm making sure that that is going to happen. If you don't plan for it, hey, it just may or may not happen. And so it's about approaching that which is important with a sense of urgency. And I call them important urgencies. And then being patient in the result, being patient in the moment, allowing that moment to unfold. But if you don't schedule it, something else is going to fill that void.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. I can see that for sure, and that's what's kind of happened in my family this week. Is we've really started kind of planning a little bit more for balance this week with each other, while
Yeah,
getting them ready for camp and whatnot. But I love that you brought up be patient in the moment too. That's a really great kind of just mantra.
yeah. I mean, and then again, man, I wouldn't say never, right? Like, I struggle with the big stuff, but I know that stuff's going to work out. What I struggle with is, um, when knowing that dinner was supposed to be in 5 minutes and now it's like 15 minutes later, and why have you not even set the table yet? like what's going on? You know what I mean? I'll get stressed out about the real small things in life. And why is that? Well, it's just how it's one of the it's one of my faults, man. Is I'll just get stressed really quick in terms of wanting things to get done, and there was this plan that I had in my mind. And now it's not according to plan. So being able to adjust and the mental flexibility, I need it, man. And that's what my kids will coach me on. Dad, it's okay. Like we'll get it. And all I need is a couple seconds. I just need those reminders. You know what I mean? And I'm embarrassed to say it. Like I don't want to get stressed out like getting ready for dinner, but it's like when things aren't going according to plan and how I thought it was going to go requires me to adjust. And then I'll tell my kids like, and they always just throw it right back at me, right? Plan on your plan, not going according to plan.
Yeah, yeah. I love that your kids help coach you, but I think that what you said, it has transferability to just every aspect of life, and family life, sports. But when your expectations aren't going to plan, they're not being met, are you going to be able to adjust? Are you going to be able to adapt? Or are you just going to swim in stress and end up faltering?
Yeah.
Okay, so on May 5th, today is June 8th. We're recording on June 8th of 2023. And a month ago on May 5th, you released your eighth book. And congrats on writing 8 books. I've never written a book, so that is fantastic. So kudos to
Thanks, man.
that. I love the title of it. I can't wait to be patient. So I think that our conversation has already kind of led to understanding the title. But if you want to explain the title, go for it. And then, we talked about being patient in the moment. I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit
Yeah.
more.
I mean, we're designed as people to get from point A to point B as fast as possible. Which program are you going to buy? And this is all you need to pay attention to. Just pay attention to marketing that you're going to see in life, right? They are selling you on the idea of speed. And here's my point. What program are you going to buy? Hey, how to be a millionaire in 7 to 9 months, or how to be a millionaire in 7 to 9 years? So we equate speed with being the easier path. Well, that's the path I want. None of us get into the car, punch in our GPS, and then take the slowest route to get there. Like we don't do that, right? We're always looking at, okay, this is 17 minutes, this is 22. We're not taking the 22-minute route. So we are pre-wired for speed and to get there as fast as possible. However, the issue with that is when we focus only on speed, and speed as it's important, but when we only focus on speed, an interesting thing happens and it's back to the urgency piece. Like we become urgent towards everything. And now when we're urgent towards everything, that's when the stress, the angst, the being overwhelmed and rushed come into play, because now we got a sense of urgency towards everything. And you know what? It really does not matter. Well, now there's no off switch to our speed. Now there's no off switch in order to get there as fast as we can. And it doesn't matter if we're waiting for a coffee or if we're stuck in traffic or whatever it's going to be in life, right? Waiting for this to unfold. We're going to wait. And so oftentimes then it's how we behave while waiting. And I always say, and I'm kind of giving away like the one piece, but it's like, and I know we'll talk about it, but it's like, look, instead of focusing on speed, let's focus on rhythm. So I think rhythm is more important than speed. What's the rhythm? What's the cadence of our life? Because if we're not transitioning well from one situation to another, we're taking that past situation into the next one. And then that's going to carry over. And then before we notice, it's like, man, I'm just overwhelmed because we haven't had the off switch. We haven't allowed our mind to recover, to catch up. We haven't debriefed. And we have in our lives this action bias and this speed bias when we really need to get back to what's the rhythm of our life, what's the cadence of life. Look at farmers. Okay, I love using this example, if that's okay. So farmers are great, man, because my family on my dad's side, I mean, they were dairy farmers, and there's nobody that works harder than farmers, right? There's really not. I mean, we know how hard farmers work, man, 6 days a week. So if you look at it, though, well, farmers inherently realize that there's only so much that they can do in the day. So the rhythm of what they have in life, even though they're up at 4:30 and they're working, buddy, at 7 o'clock, man, that's when they're taking that coffee break. That's when they're seeing. That's when they're having the conversation. After the coffee, after the breakfast, they know, hey, then this is scheduled up. Then they're having, um, dinner at 1 o'clock, whenever that's going to be. Not supper, not lunch, but it's dinner. And then they have the afternoon pieces that they're going to have to do. But there's a rhythm to what they're doing. They know that the day that the seed is planted is not the day that it's harvested. And we don't have that kind of structure in our lives. We're just moving from point to point, and that's the part about being time and not, can't wait. Approach the mental game through time. Approach the mental health or mental wellness through time first, and then we're going to kind of see, hey, what are the other areas and the gaps that I need to improve upon.
Yeah. Yeah, Dr. Bill, that is fantastic. And you got me thinking again about ultra marathons. And I am guilty of during those downtimes, I kind of referred to as I'm going to be feeling like death a few times throughout a race, um, trying to urgently push through it onto being feeling good again instead of just continuing my rhythm through it, feeling good through it. Um, and then on a bigger level, I saw this reel recently, and I don't know if you've come across it. There's a lot of great Kobe Bryant reels out there that I love watching them. They motivate me. But there was one where he is talking about, it's like, I see a lot of young athletes getting into basketball and they're just going right for trying to have the coolest dunk out there, the most awesome dunk, the most cool layup, whatever. And he's like, you know what? That stuff does not matter. Like, you need to focus on your fundamentals. And so I was thinking about with those that comment about stick to your fundamentals. And he's like, this is exactly how I play basketball with my kids. I'm like, or coach my kids. Let's focus on the fundamentals. And I think it's those fundamentals that help you maintain that rhythm. It's the fundamentals that the farmers focus on to maintain the rhythm versus, trying to get right to, the destination.
And the fundamentals never change. That's the part, right? The
Yeah.
fundamentals never change. And whenever issues start happening in life, always got to get back to just looking at the fundamentals. Simple is powerful, right? It's a genius to keep it simple, man.
Yeah. I just wrote that down. Simple is powerful. I love that. Okay. So I think along the same vein of conversation, I think everything that you've been mentioning probably applies to my next question. And that is, a lot of athletes focus on beating others. And I feel like this could be detrimental. How do you feel about that?
I think it's a lot easier to focus on beating somebody else than it is the most difficult opponent. The most difficult opponent has a strategic advantage over us. And the reason why is because it knows our hurts, hangups, and headaches, man. It knows our strengths. It doesn't take much to figure ourselves out. And that's our own mind. And that is the most difficult opponent. So if you're trying to play one-on-one against somebody, one-on-one basketball against somebody that already knows what you're going to do before you do it, that's who you're competing against. Well, boy, you want to go up against that opponent all the time, or do you want to play somebody new? It's easier to try and beat somebody else than it is to really focus on yourself, what you're doing, where your journey is, where your process is, and how are you trying to improve. That is way harder, because that is a game that really you don't win, you just get better at it. And the reason why is our mind really just has one job, and that's to keep us safe. That's the mind's job, keep you safe. Well, when you start to push yourself and getting out of your comfort zone in whatever area you're wanting to improve in life, the mind doesn't want that. It wants you to be safe. Well, the way you stay safe is just stay under the covers and don't do anything. Well, again, that goes contrary then to our innate uh, desire, I think, to improve ourselves and improve other people's lives, and to enjoy life. So you're always going to be running up against that. And that's just a way more difficult opponent, man, is competing against yourself.
Yeah, and I think that, that is it seems like it's a big pillar of the mental toughness of dealing with adversity, not just adversity of others, but these kind of these, and I don't know if adversity would be the right word, but the places where you need to focus and do better for yourself, some sort of skill, some sort of mental aspect where it's like, hey, like I get flustered in these situations, but focusing on that self to then boost your mental toughness.
Yeah, well said, man.
Okay, with this, you mentioned earlier kind of building other people up, and I think that that is something that is so important in life, and I think that that is really a place of coming from love. When you want to build other people up, you're coming from a place of love. It's always horrible to see other people trying to break down people and tear them down. Now I get it during sports, there's trash talking, that's how it goes. That's part of the game. But I'm talking about simple daily interactions. Maybe it's with coworkers, maybe it's with whoever, but building each other up is so important. And so, with family and friends, how can we help cultivate a successful culture? And it could be around family, friends, coworkers, whoever.
Back to the cash and carry kind of guy. I mean, I think culture is just how we treat one another, and how are we treating one another in our relationships. I think it is about knowing how you want to be coached, knowing how other people want to be coached. No, I'm saying coach, I'm just saying like in terms of the relationship. Um, rising tide lifts all ships, man. I think you have to root for one another. You have to root for one another to have success. Because if somebody is in your circle who might be a competitor in your field, right? But they're in that space that you're in and you want to get there. When they have success, it inherently is telling us that we can have success too. And competition, like we need the competition, man. It's how we kind of get better. And to answer the question in terms of like the culture, man, I look at real success as being able to root for everybody. And when you can root for everybody, what that is really saying is that everyone can have a piece of pie, that there's enough pie for everybody, and there's not just one slice. If we're operating under the illusion that, well, there's just one slice of pie and I better get it, we're operating from that mindset that there's not enough and I'm not enough. And well, how do we get there? Well, then we're going to start dragging people down, pulling people down. And it doesn't mean to not be like confrontational, or if there's information out there that's like incorrect, by all means, man. But I'm just talking about for our own sake and sanity, how much are we cheering on other people? How much are we supporting other people? Because that inherently helps us out as well.
Yeah, yeah. I like that you said that when you see someone else be successful, it's like, hey, I can do that too. And now we got a culture of success building off of that. That's really cool. Okay, so Dr. Bell, I want to ask you one more question here. So, as I mentioned earlier, you released your eighth book a month ago. And I know that this question might be coming in a little bit early, but have you started to brainstorm your ninth book?
I love the question, man. I think it's fantastic. And here's why I love that question is even like when I finished 100 miler and then I was, people were kind of following my friends, stuff like that. And then I think it was probably at the gym, you know what I mean? It was like maybe a week later or something like that. And then somebody asked, hey, well, what's next? And it's the same exact question, right? Hey, Rob, what's next? And it's like, I think the quick answer to that is I don't know if I am going to be writing another one. That's how painful this book was to write. Because I've written 8 of them, I can't be saying the same exact thing that I wrote in book 3. Well, how many different ways can you talk about mental toughness, right? Well, that's why the power of patience. Now I look at patience as the new mental toughness, patience as recovery of the mind, man. The reason why is because it's just like if you watch any kind of championship that gets won, the media does something that they will say before the confetti's already out. You read the headline, hey, can they do it again? Hey, can they repeat? Or if it is a team or person that has had success in the past and has won it, what they start to do is now we start to rank them in terms of, hey, where's their legacy? And that's before the confetti isn't even cleaned up. You know what I mean? I'm about relishing as much as you can in those moments and enjoying that process. That I really don't know if there's going to be a next one when it comes to this one, man. This one was brutal to write. It took me 16 months to write it. It was an ultra marathon, man, because there are just many times of dark spots of this book not coming together, because it's a book of balance. You have to be urgent in life. You have to be urgent towards that which is important, and you have to be patient towards the results. There are times that don't just sit there, do something, but there are more times where it's don't just do something, sit there. Well, it's really tough to make that point, and have that resonate with people, in so many words. So that's a long way of saying, man, I really don't know. I'm just going to be staying on how do I get patience and that message of that's the real mental toughness.
Yeah, I think that was such a fantastic. A lot of things were fantastic in your explanation. You pointed out a lot with relishing that you've just released a book, the balance, but also being patient with that book just being released because, gosh, yeah, you've written 8 books. That there's a lot that you've written on those 8 books, but being patient during this time period, who knows what new lessons you might come across that you want to share that can help other people that might inform a ninth book. And I think that just jumping right into being like, what's the ninth book going to be? Well, let's let life pan out and see what happens here. And in the meantime, relish it and enjoy the balance of life. And I'm sure something will come to you. I mean, you've written 8 books, but I think it's a process and just being part of each moment. And eventually that aha moment will probably come to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Dr. Bell, this was a fantastic conversation. I felt like I really related strong to you. I got a big background in sports, and we were able to dive pretty deep into some psychology and some mental toughness, and I really, really enjoyed that. So thank you for coming on to
Absolutely,
Old
man.
Bodies Outside.
Yeah, man. If people want to
Yeah,
go to the website, can'twaitbook.com, they can take the patience quiz that we have on that. Like, do they have a patient personality? And download the infographics there. So it's can'twaitbook.com, man.
can'twaitbook.com. Fantastic, fantastic. All right. Well, I'm going to throw on that outro music, and we'll call it an episode.
Thanks, buddy.